Welcome back to the Better Than Rich show. I'm your host today, Mike Abramowitz with season 3, and we have an awesome guest today, Mr. Aaron Walker, view from the top, iron sharpens iron, the only man that I've met that have retired. Well, I think he retired 17 times, no exaggeration, but he's
Yeah.
retired three different times and came out of retirement 4. And he runs Iron Sharpens Iron. He's on a mission to have over 150 mastermind groups over the course of the next blank X period of time, helping tons of men all around the world get connected to one another and continue to live on his mission, live on his purpose. Serial entrepreneur, raised in a small little town in Nashville, outside of Nashville, a real Tennessee guy. You'll hear his little twang. Married to his wife, Robin, for 42 years and high school sweethearts. I am so pumped for this conversation. Aaron, welcome to the Better Than Rich show.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me on, man. I've been so looking forward to being your guest. I'm just honored to be here today. Thank you.
Well, I absolutely loved your book, and it's what's fun is I met you at a Podfest with Chris Krimitsos years ago in Orlando, and we were at a breakout speaking on the same stage. And I just like launched my book Grab Tomorrow, and you gave me your autographed copy, and I've had this book, and I remember, and what's crazy is I had a business card in the book where I only read the first chapter, Can't, Couldn't Do It, and Could, Did It All, the lesson from your mom. And for some reason, I put the book down and just didn't pick it back up until I was like, let me pick it back up. And I was like, I want you on the show. I love this book, and I'd love to pick it apart a little bit for our audience, because there's so many fruitful lessons here that I think are relevant. And I want, it doesn't have to be in order, but I wanted to ask you a couple of questions around the book. Is that
Sure.
okay?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So first, the first one is you got $150,000 loan from Roger and Dale. This was like a huge amount of money. You're a young kid, for you to run, a pawn shop. And how the heck do you, number one, encounter, if there's entrepreneur listening to the show, how do you come across someone that's going to trust you with $150,000? And number two, what did
Yeah.
you do with that money to turn it into, profits for them and profits for yourself?
Yeah, well, let's go way back. So I do live in Nashville, Tennessee. Been here 62 years soon. So I'm a native Nashvilleian. We're 3 generations deep. Love Nashville. People ask me all the time, if you could live wherever you want, where would you live? And I said, I can live wherever I want. And I do. And it's called Nashville, Tennessee, man. I love it in Nashville. Grew up pretty poor kid, didn't have much at all. And then I started working at a local pawn shop when I was 13 years old. When I was 18 years old, I met a couple of guys, Roger Street, Dale Garrett. They were buying diamonds and gold from me to hedge against inflation. They owned the 21st largest insurance agency in the country at the time. And I approached them one day. I had graduated from school, and I said, hey, why don't we take your resources and my experience and open our own pawn shop? And they started laughing. They said, how old are you? And I said, I'm 18. And they said, we've never had anybody 18 years old approach us about going in business. And I said, well, it's first time for everything. But back to business, what are your thoughts? And they said, what would it cost to open a pawn shop? And I'm like, I'm not sure exactly, but I'll do a little research on that and get back to you. 2 weeks later, I went back to him, and I didn't have a clue, Mike. I didn't go to college. I just graduated from high school. I didn't have any idea about putting a pro forma together or a business plan. But the best I could determine, $150,000 should get that done. Now, this was in the 70s. Like 150 grand was a lot of money
That's a
in the
lot of money.
70s. And so it's a lot of money today, but when you're 18 years old in the 70s, it was a lot of money. So I went back to them and I laid out my plan. Well, little did I know they were checking on me in the background. They found out I was a pretty good kid, did really well in school, and they said, we're going to do it. And I'm like, what? And they said, we're going to do it. And so I owned a third, sweat equity. And so I went and found a location, negotiated a lease, opened up a pawn shop, bought merchandise, started knocking on doors every night. A year later, I get married after Robin graduates from high school. And I set her down one day at the table and I said, Robin, listen, we both have been broker than a convict our whole life. We may never get this chance again, and we've got to go for it. And it was a 10-year loan, and we paid it off in 36 months.
Wow.
And I said, hey, I can do it again. And we did. And we did that multiple times again until I was 27 when a Fortune 500 approached us and bought us out.
Yeah. And then at 27 is when you sold your first business or sold your business. And that's,
Yeah.
I mean, that's where a lot of people's journey sometimes would end. It's like, I worked really hard. I sold the business. I became a, multimillionaire, and, now I'm ready to live the dream. And if in your book, you kind of explain a little bit that's if I read the book right, you got bored.
Yeah, I
that you
did. You know what
retired and
happened is I took a little time off, and I don't want to mislead anybody. It was a phenomenal moment. I mean, it was something incredible, and that lasted about 90 days.
mm,
How amazing it was about 90 days, and about a year later, Robin woke me up from a nap, and she said, "Hey, you've gained 50 pounds. You're getting in the bed in the middle of the day. Uh, this is not what I signed up for."
mm.
And I'm like, you're right. I got to do something. So I went back and bought the pawn shop that I started with when I was 13 years old. And then we went on a process that we quadrupled that company in the next 9 years.
It's amazing. And
The thing was, Mike, that I discovered, because I was broke as a kid. I didn't have any money. And what I discovered is that the thrill of having a little bit of resources wasn't really what I had portrayed it being. It didn't give me the sense of satisfaction. It didn't give me the real joy. It didn't give me the real peace that I thought it was going to give me.
mm,
And it was nice, and you can buy things with the resources. I hate it when rich people go, hey, I'm not rich, but I got a little bit of resources. But when they go, money's not important, and I want to be like, yeah, it is. It's real important. Like when you want to pay your mortgage and your car note and buy groceries, money's pretty important.
mm,
But I learned not to make it my idol, not to make it the thing that was the only reason I was getting up each and every day. And so money's got a great place, but it's a tool, and it's to be used properly. And I was unaware at that time really how to be a good steward, to really take care of the resources that I had been entrusted with. And it was a journey many, many years after that before I really discovered what that looked like.
and it's what I love about your story is some of these lessons that you learned in your late teens, lessons from your dad, lessons from things he did and the things that he didn't do with business. And you essentially took a lot of these lessons from your adolescence, from your teenage years, from your 20s. And in a moment, we'll come back to a circumstance that happened at 40 years
Sure.
old, and
Yeah.
how the lessons that showed up in the early chapters of life were so needed during the later chapters of life. I am Before we kind of explore some of those later chapters, if there was anything that if there's like a younger entrepreneur in their 20s, right, and
Yeah.
they're in more of that grind season, probably that season where you're
Sure.
working real hard to try to build that business up and sell it.
Yeah.
What what is some counsel that you might be able to offer to some of these individuals that are just like working so hard, but they're like, I see other people, like I want to systemize things, I want to get things flowing, like with everything that now. I mean, you have your hands in 14 businesses is what you've worked in or bought and sold or had
Right.
your hands in at one
Right.
point, 20 masterminds, retired 3 times. So going back to, if you had to relate to that audience, what might you
Yeah.
say to them?
I got to be careful with this question. And the reason is because I don't want to demotivate your audience, because I think there's a time to be in the grind. I think there's a time and there's a season in our life where we've got to go above and beyond. It requires more work. If you really want to excel, it requires work. What I wish that I had done, and I'll even explain this now a little bit, what I wish that I had done was built better boundaries. And it's okay to work extra. It's okay to work long hours. But if you do it at the expense of your family, ultimately, at one point in your life, you're going to come home and you're going to be a loser. And let me explain what I mean by that. I came home. Robin had done a phenomenal job. with our girls, Brooke and Holly. Got two daughters. One's 39 now, one's 36. And beautiful, beautiful little girls. Now they're beautiful young ladies with family. They've given Robin and I 5 grandchildren. Best time of my life, to have these grandkids. But I almost made a really big mistake because I came home with a pocket full of money to a house full of strangers. And Robin got me off to the side one day and she said, I couldn't be more grateful. Like, you have worked so hard. You've provided us a beautiful home, a beautiful living. I'm able to stay at home. Uh, but I feel like I'm raising our girls by myself. I'm taking them to cheerleading practice. I'm taking them to ball practice. Sometimes we go to church without you. I feel a little bit like a single parent might feel. And man, it really dawned on me, Mike, that I'm really offering up some of the things that are the most precious in life to acquire something that has no real significant meaning. And so it was a real pivotal moment for me to go, you know what, I'm still going to work hard. And I do even now at 62 years old. I work hard. I give it all I've got, right? I love it. I love to work. And see, that's one of the problems is I love it. And when you love something, you're going to pour yourself into it. When you've got a real mission, you're even going to work harder. When you're aspirational, you're very motivated. You have that grit and that determination and that perseverance. Man, all that culminates into a point of extreme focus. And it did for me. And I was like, hey, I've got this one store. I did a 10-year loan in 36 months, paid it off. I can do it again. And I did. Then I went down on Broadway and bought Broadway Pawn Shop. And I went to Rose Loan and bought it. And then I went to Woodbine Loan and I bought it. And Aaron's Jewelry and Loan, and Streets Jewelry and Loan, and Aaron's on Gallatin Road, and all these stores. And I was like, man, I can do this.
Hmm.
And then I started buying out some of the rest of the competition. And I'm like, man, I can do this. Like, I've got the golden touch, right? I'm going to work hard. I'm going to show you. And all that was going well, but I wasn't paying attention to the relationships that matter most. And that was Robin and my kids. Thankfully, she had the courage to come to me and talk to me and say, hey, let's talk through this. What would it look like if you do it a little different? So I guess that's a long way around answering your question, but I would say be very determined, yet set very specific boundaries.
And I love that response because I really love the chapter in your book where you talk about boundaries. In fact, the boundaries that you said even around your relationship with Robin. I just talked about
Yeah.
this with one of my groups that I run. I run an accountability group, and I said, I'm interviewing this man who won't take a photo with another woman, doesn't do business with other women, doesn't do anything to jeopardize the relationship with his
Mm,
wife at all because he has a boundary that he's created, and I
yeah.
really love that philosophy. If you want to just continue to speak to that a
Yeah.
little bit on number one, how do you
Yeah.
stay so disciplined to such a strict boundary, and number
Yeah.
two,
Yeah. Thank you.
why did you choose that?
So I get opportunities to speak at various places. That's actually how you and I met. I was speaking at that conference, and uh, oftentimes I'll either sell or give away my book, View from the Top. And at the end of the presentation, people will come up and want it autographed, and I don't know why they want my autograph, but they say, "Hey, would you sign it?" You even pointed it out at the beginning of the interview, and it's an opportunity for me to talk to people. And invariably, women are in the audience, and they're great. I'm glad they're there, but they'll say, "Hey, do you mind if I grab a selfie with you?" And just to kind of commemorate this experience. And I'll say no. And they look at me real offended at first. I say, will you allow me to share why? And obviously, they're a little bit ruffled, but they say, yeah. And I say, I'm in San Diego, California, speaking at, one of these events. And my wife is at home sitting on the couch in Nashville. And the first thing you're going to do is take this selfie and post it on Facebook or Instagram or somewhere. And my wife's going to see it on the feed because you're going to tag me in it. And my wife's sitting at home, and I've got my arm around a good looking 25-year-old in San Diego. What do you think that's going to do for my marriage? Like, what kind of doubt could that place in my wife's mind? I'm out speaking, and I got this good looking 25-year-old holding my book, smiling, posting it on Facebook. And I said, I've made a commitment to my wife, and nobody is more important to her. And I'm honoring my wife by doing this. And you know what they say invariably? I
No,
wish my husband felt that way.
mm.
and they really respect it. They honor it. Now, I'm not disking women. I'm not saying, hey, I'm too good to do that. But, I don't go to dinner with women. I'm never alone in any location with women. It's just a boundary that I've built because I've been happily married for 42 years, and I want to be happily married for another 30 or 40 years. And I feel like as long as I'm showing my wife that I'm honoring her, I'm protecting her, I've established these boundaries, then there shouldn't be any reason that we won't have another successful many decades. And so it's just one of many boundaries, but you highlighted that one. So I wanted to give context.
No, that's really good because I mean, a lot of men. I can't speak on behalf of them all, but there's a fairer. The argument could be, well, um, like almost like I like my independence. I like to be able to do what I
Sure.
want. Like I love my wife. She knows I love her. I would never do anything like that. Why would I need to, you know, demonstrate it in this way? And what you're saying here is this was a commitment that you've made, and you want to follow through on that commitment. Um, I thought it was beautiful. I think the discipline behind it is beautiful. I love the sentiment. I think the sentiment is great. I think frankly the discipline is also one of the most
Yeah.
like
Well,
the follow
appreciate
through
that.
of the sentiment. That's almost
Yeah.
more powerful than the sentiment itself.
I'm not saying we should impose this on every male out there that's speaking and not to take a picture, but if you're placing any seed of doubt, if your spouse feels any sense of competition, if they feel second, they don't feel most important, that's not going to go well long term for your relationship. And I can give you countless examples as to where there's a lot of marriage counseling needed as a result of them being apart, connecting with old friends. So we could go on and on down that rabbit trail, but you've got to do what works well for your marriage. You've got to do the thing where you and your partner both are satisfied and happy with the communication that you've communicated with one another in regards to the boundaries that you're building. And I'm probably more strict now than I was in earlier years because I've learned a little bit more. I've learned the pitfalls. I've learned where the landmines are at. I'm trying
Hmm.
to dodge those a little bit. I'm trying to share a few nuggets. But there's not a lady out there that wouldn't appreciate her husband taking that approach to honor her.
Hmm.
So a lot of guys may say, yeah, I like my independence. Well, you made a covenant with this person that you're going to honor them, cherish them. And a lot of guys often say, my family is first. Well, if that's true, you need to let your actions speak loudly rather than just your words. And so for me, I've just elected to put these boundaries in place, not do certain things, do certain things to honor my children, my grandchildren, and my spouse.
Hmm. And good thing you put a lot of that in place in the beginning stages of your relationship, because when you did hit some of those obstacles and roadblocks when you needed
Right.
them the most, you had a strong foundation. And I'd love to explore, one of the big roadblocks that happened
Mm,
with Enrique. That was, I read that in
mm,
your book. And
yeah.
um, I mean, you remember the date, you remember the whole situation, and
Yeah.
I'd
Sure.
love for you just to speak to this, because this is something
Okay.
that not I can't say every audience member is going to relate to what you experienced, but I think some of the audience members could relate to a circumstantial challenge that's
Right.
unpredictable, that's
Sure.
unexpected, that can throw you through a
Yeah.
whirlwind. And I'd love for you to not only explain what happened, but I'd love for you to talk about, the 5 year, kind of drought that you were in, and how you
Yeah.
came out of
Sure.
that using your mastermind, and getting connected with
Mm,
Dave Ramsey and Dan Miller, and like how you had that support group. I love this whole story. So if you could
mm.
take us through that, that would be beautiful.
Yeah, sure. So this happened at the very pinnacle of my career. Things couldn't have been better. I was working 3 days a week. My partner was working the other 3 days, probably making as much or more money than I've ever made in my career. Two beautiful daughters, teenage daughters. They were just gorgeous. They were excelling in every area of their life. We had just built a new home that was phenomenal. Things just couldn't have been any better. I was living like in utopia. I mean, like I had to pinch myself. It was like, man, here I'm 40 years old. Things are just incredible. Getting to play golf, getting to fish, getting to work 3 days a week. I was like, man, I'm living the dream. And August 1st, 2001, I was headed to the office. It was 7:30 in the morning, and it's hot in Nashville. I know it's hot in Tampa too, but man, in Nashville, the humidity was terrible. I had just bought a brand new 2001 Lincoln Navigator, candy apple red. It was beautiful. I mean, this was a tricked out Lincoln Navigator, and my day was going incredible. I got within a mile and a half of the office, and as I was headed, there was a 4-lane highway I was going down. It's called Gallatin Pike. I was in Madison, Tennessee, and there was a guy crossing the street ahead of me. I could see him up ahead. I was probably 3 blocks away at the time, probably doing 45, 50 miles an hour down this 4-lane highway. And I saw him cross the northbound lanes, and he got to the median and he stopped. And all this happened like 4 seconds. I mean, I'm telling the story, but it all happened in like 4 seconds. And his shoulders slumped, and his posture was, I'm waiting, right? And I obviously knew he was waiting on me to pass. And I looked to my right, and there was a city bus parked in the road, not at a bus stop, but in the right-hand outside lane. I was in the inside lane, closest to the median. And I knew just through observation, he was going to catch the bus. I mean, that's where he was headed, but he was waiting on me to pass. So I sped back up. As soon as I got to him, he took off running for the bus. And the rest of the story. I hit a guy, and I can still see it like in my mind's eye right now. I can hear it, I can see it, I can feel it in the steering wheel. And immediately I pulled over to the side of the road, and I started shaking, Mike, uncontrollably. It was like everything slowed down. It was like slow motion. That's what it was like. And I don't want to make it too dramatic, but that's the way I felt. And I didn't have the courage to turn around. I was like, oh my God, what am I going to see if I turn around? And finally I said, you got to turn around. I turned around. Cars were stopping everywhere, people jumping out of their car. And there was this guy face down in the road. And I got out of the car, and I grabbed my phone, and I tried to dial 911, and I couldn't. Like my hand was shaking so hard I could not control my hand to dial 911. Finally, I put the butts of my hand together, my palms, and I dialed 911. It wasn't a minute, I guess. Man, I heard all these sirens, and I went over, and this guy was motionless, laying face down. And he was an older guy. And the ambulance got there, and they turned him over, put him on a gurney, and the police got there, and they asked who was driving the car, and I said I was. And they said, you need to go back. And the patrolman took me back, put me in the patrol car. And I sat there and watched all this unfold. And I was praying, God, please let this guy be okay. Like it was so surreal. Like it wasn't me. It was like a dream. It was like, wake me up, that kind of experience. So finally, the policeman goes around. They put the guy in the ambulance, took him off. And the policeman goes around, starts talking to all these people that, were present. He comes and gets in the car, asks for my driver's license, gave my driver's license. I said, is that guy going to be okay? And they said, he's got severe head trauma. And I don't know. He's alive right now. And he said, well, I want you to know, I've interviewed everybody here. Everybody said you weren't doing anything wrong. You weren't speeding. We're not going to charge you, but we obviously have to get all your information. I said, absolutely. Well, all these people started showing up, blocking the road off, setting these cones up. They were taking pictures. It was crazy. It was like the scene in a movie. So finally I got out and I went to the office, and I finally told everybody I got to go home. So I went home, and I called my wife. Robin was in Acuna, Mexico on a missions trip with our 2 daughters from our church, and told her what happened. My buddies came over, consoled me, and said, hey man, things are probably going to be okay. And I had given them my phone number, my address, and everything. And I said, hey, when you find out something about this gentleman, please give me a call. So Saturday morning rolls around, 9:30, I get a phone call. And it's the Vanderbilt Hospital trauma unit. And they said, are you Mr. Walker? And I said, yes. And they said, we're calling about Enrique. I won't quote his last name, and I said, yes. And they said, I'm sorry to inform you he didn't make it. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And she said, no, I'm sorry. He had severe head trauma where he hit the front left quarter panel on my truck. It spun him around, and his head hit my mirror. That spun him around again, and his body hit the left quarter panel on the driver's side. And then he fell face down. It was the head trauma from the mirror that killed him. And so, needless to say, man, I was in a funk really bad. I took about a week off, went back to the office, and about 2 weeks later, an incident happened at the store where something snapped. Nothing's ever snapped for me. It was like, but this emotional thing just snapped, and told my partner, we've got to go have dinner tonight. We went and had dinner, and I said, listen, I've been chasing money since I was 13. I'm 40 years old. I got a pretty good life. I'm gonna retire. And he said, what? And I said, I can't handle it. I'm going to retire. So we worked out a deal, sold him the business, and I took the next 5 years off. And so kind of got my legs back under me, worked with counselors, had a good group of guys around me. And that's at the time where Dave Ramsey invited me to join his mastermind group. Unbeknownst to him at the time, Dave and I have been friends since the early 90s. I was the second person to sponsor his show. I sponsored Dave Ramsey's show for 21 consecutive years, and we became very good friends as a result of that. But little did he know at the time, that just shows you how God's always working in the background. He was formulating this mastermind group for me to join literally right after this happened, and I needed those guys in my life. And they spent the next dozen years, helping me kind of work through some of those situations. But it took about 5 years to get my legs back under me.
Wow. It's a remarkable story, and I really appreciate you sharing that, because it is, again, not something that everyone's going to experience specifically, but the idea that you're at the pinnacle and life happens, and
Yeah.
life shook you a little bit, and from that you really connected with this mastermind. Now are on a mission to also help with a ton of people with your masterminds, which we'll talk about in just a moment. I want to bring up the Dave Ramsey situation, because you said you worked with him in the early 90s. I had one
Yeah.
question, selfish question for myself, because I
Sure.
was interested. I heard you tell the story, but I wanted to answer. I wanted an answer here. You said Dave Ramsey is gave you like a free trial, like something like that, to trial on his radio show, and then he's like, all right,
Yeah.
you started blowing up with all these touches and you got all these things, so then he's like, all
Right.
right, we need a contract for a year. So I want to know, how much did it cost to become friends with Dave Ramsey? Like, how much did this
That's good.
friendship cost back in the
That's good.
90s?
That's good.
I'm
Yeah, it
genuinely.
wasn't cheap back then either. I think Dave was snowballing me. And let me just tell you the story real quick. I was on my way to work in the Madison Chamber of Commerce, where I had my business. I just built a brand new 10,000 square foot store. It was state of the art. I mean, it was a beautiful place. And this is in the early 90s. Uh, there was a speaker at the Luby's Cafeteria. A guy was going to be talking about a radio show he was starting here in Nashville. And that piqued an interest. And I went in, heard him speak, and went up afterwards. There was probably 20 people there. Went up afterwards, introduced myself, and I said, hey, why don't you come down a mile down the street? I want you to see my new store. So he got in his car and he drove down there and walked in, and he goes, oh my gosh, this place is beautiful. He said, tell me more about your business. And I did. And he said, this is just the kind of business, that I want to advertise on my show. He said, would you be one of my sponsors and advertise on my show? And I said, no, I never even heard of you. 10 minutes ago, it was the first time we met. You're wanting me to advertise with you. Like, what are you even about? And he started telling me what he was going to do, teach people to get out of debt and all this stuff. And I thought to myself, that'll never work. That's what I was thinking to myself. And then he came back in the course of the conversation and he said, let me ask you something. If I give you a free week, would you try a free week? And I said, yeah. He said, my audience is local here. He said, people are going to hear all about your business, and let's do it for a week. And I said, okay, I got nothing to lose. So, man, he started talking about our store. He got me on the phone. We do a live spot. And for 3 days, people were pouring into our store. And I was like, man, this is like, what's that guy's name? Jones or whatever, drink the Kool-Aid. I said, these people have drank the Kool-Aid. Like, what in the world? I started listening to the show, and he was ranting and raving about getting out of debt, cutting up your credit cards. And I said, this guy's about half lost his mind, but these people are listening. They're loving the show. So I called him 3 days in and I said, hey, listen, these people are biting this hook, line, and sinker, and I want to be involved in it. And he said, okay, you'll have to sign an annual contract. I said, 3 days ago, you gave me a week. Now you're going to make me sign an annual contract? And he goes, yep, if you want on this show, you're going to sign an annual contract. Well, I don't mind sharing now. I don't even know what the spots cost now. It was $300 for a minute spot, and we would do them live. And we did that every day. I'd call in. He gave me the time to call in. But then it got about a month or two in where I was doing 2 spots a day. And so I would call at the beginning of the show. I'd call at the end of the show. We'd do a live spot. Dave would get me on. I would tell about a special. And people would come in. They would stop their cars. They would come in. They say, hey, I want to see that special every day. It didn't matter what I was selling. They would buy that special. Well, that turned into a 21-year commitment that we sponsored this show. We were his second. So I guess you could say $600 a day is what I was spending, but I can't even begin to tell you what that gave back. And Dave and I became friends, and then he invited me to join his mastermind group. I didn't. You didn't ask for this story, but I'll tell you real quick.
Just so everyone knows, it's only about $200,000 a year. That's all.
Yeah. Well, that was a lot of money in the 90s too. You do that for 21 years. Like, I need to go remind him of that and tell him that house he's got, I helped pay for. But
that's right.
Anyway, so I saw him at the Curb Center in Nashville. Mercy Me was playing. I didn't even know he was there. And he was going to the concession stand, and I said, hey. And he looked over and he said, hey, what are you doing? I said, I'm just enjoying this show. And so he went to the concession stand and he came back. Sharon was sitting with him just a few rows in front of us. And he came back there and he goes, hey, I want you to come to my office next Wednesday morning. And I said, for what? And he said, I want you to think about joining my mastermind group. And I said, I don't even know what a mastermind group is. And he said, just come to the office Wednesday morning, 7:00, and I'll let you in, and we'll talk about it. Well, I went home and told Robin. I said, I don't want to go. She said, why? And I said, you know how Dave is. He's going to be all up in my face. He's going to find out we've got debt, and I don't want to tell him that I've mortgaged some of these real estate properties that we bought, and he's going to be asking about all this personal stuff. I don't want to go. She goes, just go and try it. So I went, met all the other guys. Following week, I'd go back. This was every week. We met in his office. He had a conference room. And about 3 months in, these guys started really letting the veil down. They started sharing intimately about their relationships, about their kids, about the challenges they were facing, problems in their business. And I started going, oh my gosh. And I went home and I was laughing. When I got home, Robin goes, what are you laughing about? I said, they're more screwed up than I am. And she started laughing. And I said, I have found my people. And so we got a good chuckle out of that. Well, that gave me permission, Mike, to really let my veil down, to really let the facade down and say, hey, I got struggles, challenges. Like, I've never been a dad to a 16-year-old. I've never been married 25 years. I've never had issues financially like I'm confronted with right now. And it was a safe place. And it changed my life. Everything about my life, personally, professionally, and spiritually, it changed.
That's beautiful. And with the mastermind, your core values, the relationships matter most, to make things amazing. I'll let you speak to those. Did those come before you joined these masterminds? Did they come as a product of these masterminds? Did you create these?
It was a byproduct of the mastermind. It was a byproduct. Like, some of those terminologies I'd never been exposed to. Some of the things that we taught and that we teach now that I learned through that process. I didn't even really know that much about a mission statement or a purpose statement or core values. Like, I kind of knew what some of my core values were, but not easily identifiable like I do today. Like, we use them as a filter today to make every decision. And so just learning that process. But what I learned probably more than anything was that real strength begins at the intersection of vulnerability and transparency. And when you're willing to let that veil down and really expose yourself to a great degree, showing what, your hindrances are, so some of your blind spots, understanding your kryptonite, your superpowers, when you really start diving in and understanding, it really helps you make decisions in the future. A lot of people tell me when I do these interviews, well, who wouldn't want to be in a mastermind group with Dan Miller and Ken Abraham and Dave Ramsey? I want to remind the audience, they weren't then who they are now. And that's the value of being in these masterminds, is because everyone's business up levels because you have huge accountability. You have people that you can confine in. You don't know what you don't know. And the greatest asset of being in a mastermind group is someone else's perspective that has similar or alignment in their core values. And then you can go and share. They give you resources, ideas, accountability. They hold you to the task. They check up on you. They follow. You're somewhat of in like a board of directors, people that can help you make decisions. And when you do that, every area of your life you level up in.
Hmm. And for those of you listening to the show, we have episode 21, which is how to find your core values. So you can always go back and refer back to episode 21 about how to find your core values. We also have the power of purpose and helping you craft your purpose statement on episode 17. So if you wanted to check those out. And Aaron, would you mind sharing what your I have your core values. They're beautiful, and I
Sure.
want you to share your core
Yeah.
values. I'd also love for
Yeah.
you to
Sure.
share the
Sure.
process of what you went through to come up with
Yeah.
revealing some of these core values.
Yeah. I appreciate that. There's a guy in Iron Sharpens Iron Mastermind, our mastermind group. His name is Scott Beebe. He owns a company called My Business on Purpose. Scott was a one-on-one client, and then he joined our organization. He was very instrumental in helping us build the systems and the processes out, really helping me understand what crafting a vision statement was, helping me understand my unique core values. There's a lot of things that people say, integrity and character. Well, that's just the foundation of being a human being, right? We all should have those. But what are your unique core values? Like, what are the things that really resonate with you? What is it that you stand on principle about? What is it that really is a matter of the heart? And when I started thinking about all the businesses, you made reference to those earlier, the number that I've owned, I thought relationships matter most to me in every area of my life, like personally, professionally. I mean, the relationships are the most important thing. Now, I did get those out of balance initially because I didn't have huge accountability in my life. But understanding now the value of accountability and having these in front of me, matter of fact, you can't see it, but to my left, there's a stainless steel plaque, and on it are my core values. And everyone in our organization knows these core values. And the number one core value is relationships matter most. The second one is make it amazing. Like, I don't want to do it if we're going to halfway do it. I brought home a C on my report card once, and my mom said, "Never again." I said, "What?" I tried. And she goes, "No, no, no. I know you can do better than this." And she said, "That's average." And I said, "What's wrong with average?" She goes, "Well, average is you're just as close to the bottom as you are the top,
Hmm.
and you can do much better than this. We need to make it amazing. And I know you've got the determination to make it amazing. I want to see it amazing." And I've lived by that principle my entire life. The third thing is no excuses. I hate excuses. I don't want an excuse. I was late to a meeting the other day, and when I walked in, the guy texted me. I was only 10 minutes from my home where we were meeting. He goes, "Hey, Big A, are we still meeting today?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll be right there in 10 minutes." I walked in, and I said, "I've got a good reason that I'm late." He goes, "You do?" And I said, "Yeah, I forgot you." And he said, he started laughing. He goes, "I knew you'd tell me straight up, Big A. I could have said I was in a meeting. It went long. The traffic was bad." It's like, no, just own it. Just own whatever it is, and people will respect you more as a result of it.
Hmm.
Our fourth core value is everything is figure outable. People laugh at that word. It is a word. Look it up. My team knows that when we're in a discussion, they can never say, "There's no way we can do it." Like, everything is figure outable. But we'll figure this out. I don't know what it looks like today, but we're going to figure it out, right? It's having that confidence void of arrogance. It's like, hey, you get in the trenches, let's figure it out. It may not look exactly like you thought it was going to originally, but let's figure it out. And then the last core value is truth before opinion. And for us, I'm Christian by faith. I look through the biblical lens to establish what truth is, and we'll run it through those 66 books. And if it's in there, okay, then I'll honor and listen to your opinion. But for us, it's truth before opinion. Those are our core values.
It's awesome. Yeah, when I heard those, I had them written down. Relationships matter most. Make things amazing. No excuses. Everything is figure outable. Truth before opinion. And I like that you just shared, because one of my questions I have here is how to find the lens for that. Like, how do you find the lens for truth versus opinion?
Yeah,
And you just said that
sure.
your lens comes from your faith, if I heard that right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, really, if we don't have something to establish truth, right? A lot of the stuff in the Bible I don't understand, right? That's why we have faith, but it's a reference point. It's a line in the sand. I can point back and say, I established truth here. And if you don't have that, what are you establishing truth on? What is it?
Mm.
And just saying, well, this is the way I see it, for me, is not a real good answer because we have to have something to establish what truth is in our life. Otherwise, anything goes, and we know how that works out.
Mm. I have like three really good questions I still want to ask. So I respect your time, but it's okay if I ask these couple of questions real quick before we have for the exits.
Absolutely.
So the
Absolutely.
first one, I'll in no particular order. These are the ones I want to ask. The first one is I want to talk about your technology addiction that you referenced and why you got the two phones, and because I think a lot of our audience can experience this, myself included. I also want to talk about how your mastermind group brought you to a cabin to go on a hunting trip, and
Mm,
happened to be with a
mm,
guy that you wanted to shoot.
mm, mm. Yeah,
I'd like to dig into that just for a smidge
sure.
second, because I thought that was a really fascinating story, especially how you responded to it.
Yeah,
And the last one is in the actual mastermind group. Your process of the mastermind group, like the wins, the accountability man, and the middle abundance. I just like
sure.
to explore that each of those. So,
Yeah.
and
All right.
those are the three final questions before we wrap ahead for the
Yeah,
exits
cool.
here. If you don't mind, just speaking to each of those, and again, whichever one you'd like to jam on first, it's up to you.
Yeah. So we're recording this in August of 2022. In October of 2021, I hit the wall, like literally hit the wall. I was like toast. I was having some sleep disorder problems, found out my oxygen level was going down to 82% at night. It was causing a brain fog. I'd worked probably more than I should at my age and went to the doctor and did a lot of tests. Found out some other issues that were very minor that we had to adjust. But I went to our team and I said, hey, I'm taking a sabbatical and I've been encouraged to take 2 months off. And they went, okay, when do you plan on doing this? And I said, in 2 weeks. They said, you're going to be off November and December and you're going to do that in 2 weeks. And I said, yes. And so our team is very competent, very capable. And I said, you got this. And so I literally went dark, unplugged literally from everything. No social media, no calls, no office check in, no emails, no nothing. My wife and I traveled pretty extensively through that. I took some trips. I rested. I sat on my patio. I really thought through what I wanted my life to look like in this fourth quarter of my life. And the day before I checked out, I took my phone and I looked at it and I looked at the times I picked up my phone, and I was averaging 1,050 times a week picking up my phone. Because it tells you on the iPhones, it tells you how many times you pick it up. And I went to Robin and I said, "This is one of my problems right here. Like, there's this addiction. It's real. Like, it's a real thing." And so I got another phone that nobody has the number to but Robin, Brooke, and Holly, my three closest people, my two daughters and my wife. They have the phone. If they need me, they can get me on that phone. The other phone I set aside and I just said, hey, I'm done. I'm taking a break. My assistant took care of everything. My calls took care of, emails and everything. What was remarkable is that when I came back, I had 5 emails I had to deal with. I get about 150 emails a day on average, sometimes more, sometimes a lot less, but we get a lot of emails and she took care of all of them. There's very competent, capable people out there that can take care of these things if you'll delegate it. But what I realized through that process was I was feeling the phone vibrate in my pocket and I didn't have my phone with me. And then I would stand in the grocery store in line when I had my other phone with me and I would pick it up to check something and there's nothing on it, but it's the ability to use the phone. And I was like, I literally kind of had the DTs like shaking, like I got to check something. I've got to tweet something. I've got to do a Facebook Live. I've got to send an email, a text message. I've got to do something. And it took about 2 weeks. I'm embarrassed to admit this publicly, but it took me about 2 weeks to get through that. There again, trying to build boundaries. And to be honest with you, I haven't been as disciplined. I'm being totally transparent here today. I haven't been as disciplined with that as I have other areas of my life related to my wife and kids. I'm working on it. I'm doing better. I have accountability partners. We meet every Monday morning at 6:30. I've been doing that 30 years. Every single week we meet and we talk about these
Wow.
things to hold each other accountable. And so, yeah, technology is a real thing. There's some.
And I love that you share that, and thank you for sharing it because I relate fully. I just looked at my phone. I'm at 427 times is my average
Yeah,
for the week. So, it's it's an
yeah,
unhealthy addiction, but it's
yeah,
also at the same time for some of us we feel like it's necessary. And I
yeah,
love the two things that you said is how much can you delegate and offset to someone else, and number two. I love the second phone idea where it's like I have it for an emergency, but there's
sure,
nothing else on there, and that's sometimes where it's like I convince myself, no, I need my phone on me just in case something happens. And then I use my phone for all this other stuff.
right.
So I really love those two pieces of nuggets, golden nuggets that you just shared
Yeah,
there.
yeah. There's a book out there. The name of the book escapes me right this minute. Johan Hare wrote the book, and I'm trying to remember the name of the book, but it's about social media. Stolen Focus. That's the name of it. The dopamine hits that we get, there is truly an addiction. So yeah, get that book, Stolen Focus, Johan Hare, read it. It'll scare you to death what they're doing with the
Mm,
technology. Second question you had asked was a hunting trip I went on. So I was a young guy years ago, and I did a business deal with a local known person in our community, owns a big company here, sold him a piece of property, and we get to the closing table. And he looks, brings his glasses down, looks at me over his glasses, and he laughs. And he sits back in his chair and he said, I'm not going to pay this. I'm going to pay this. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, it says on page X that I don't have to do this and I'm not going to do it. And it cost me like $40,000. And I looked at my attorney that was there and they said, he's right. And he looked at me and laughed at me in front of a couple of bankers and a couple of attorneys in this business deal that we were doing. And I signed the contract. He said, Aaron, this is the deal. You should have paid better attention. He was kind of mocking me a little bit. And he was a little older than me. I was a little younger, and I really needed that money. I mean, it was important to me. It doesn't sound like that much money, I know, but at the time, it was a lot of money, and I really needed it. And I grew to hate that guy, literally grew to hate that guy. And that's terrible, to say, especially in public. But I became very bitter. And about 2 years, it about destroyed me because I was the prisoner. You see, because I was in this bitterness, in this hatred, and I couldn't get over it. I was conniving and thinking how I could get this guy back. And there again, I'm really embarrassed to be admitting this, a businessman here in Nashville, but I'm just being honest, I'm just sharing the feelings that I had. Well, about 2 years into that process, a buddy of mine invited me to go to Buffalo, Wyoming on a mule deer and antelope hunt. And I said, yeah, it'd be great. I'd love to go. And I said, who's going? He said, oh, there's a bunch of us, about 16 of us going. And I said, yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to go. So Robin got up 4:30 in the morning, drove me to where we were meeting because I was riding with somebody else. Got my gun out, got my luggage out, kissed her bye. She got in the car and got on the interstate, headed back. And I turned around. And when I turned around, we'll call him John. That was the guy. There he stood. I'm like, you got to be kidding. I turned around to see if Robin was still there. And I turned around and looked, and I went up to my buddy and I said, you didn't tell me this guy was going. He said, well, I didn't know to need to tell you that guy was going. And I told him the story, and he goes, man, I'm sorry. He said, I didn't know. And I said, oh man, this is unbelievable. So I got in the truck with my buddy. We drove to Buffalo, Wyoming. Took us about 23 hours to get out there, hunting a 67,000 acre farm. Johnny Zizas owns the property out there. And we found all kind of antelope and mule deer, and I thought, man, this is awesome. I'm going to get a nice deer. So I get up on this hill. Everybody's hunting. Everybody's got their locations. Huge farm, and I'm scoping out the bottom, and I'll be dead gum. Here comes John walking down through the bottom. He's got an orange vest on, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, I'm going to kill him. I honestly was going to kill him. Now I've been hunting and fishing, Mike, my whole life. I'm a really good fisherman and I'm a really good hunter. I tournament fish for 35 years and I've hunted since I was born. So you do not want me shooting at you with a rifle. I am really good with a rifle. And I picked the gun up and I looked at him through the scope and I'm like, uh, and then I thought, and then I said, I'll never convince everybody that that was an antelope wearing an orange vest. That was the only thing that saved him. And I started shaking like a leaf and I put the gun down and I said, what are you doing? Like, you're a reputable businessman. I'm a deacon at my church. I'm teaching Sunday school. Like, everything in my life was the opposite of what I was thinking about. But see, that's what bitterness does to you. A lot of you listening to my voice out there today, you're bitter about something. Somebody's cheated you. You've had a spouse that's cheated on you. You've had parents that have done you wrong, and you're living in prison. So on the way back, obviously, I didn't kill John. So obviously, I'm still here today. I'm not in jail. So we get back in the car, and we're out there 10 days. He and I haven't spoke in 10 days. We get back in the car, we drive, we get 60 miles outside of Nashville. His truck breaks down on the side of the interstate. Now, why I did this, I have no idea. The caravan, there were four of us, four people in a truck, four, SUVs. We stop in a caravan, go up to him, and I don't know why at that moment this dawned on me, but I got out of the car and I walked up to him. I hadn't spoke to him the whole time. I walked up to him and I said, John, I said, if we can tow you back, my house is the first one we come to because of the side of Nashville we're coming in on. I've got a K5 Blazer sitting at home. You can drive my Blazer until you get yours fixed. First time we'd spoke in 10 days. And he looked at me and he goes, why are you doing this? And I said, I got to forgive you. And he goes, man, I'm going to pay you that money back. And I said, I'm not doing this for the money. I don't want the money. I said, I'm doing this because I have to be set free. I'm the one in captivity and I'm forgiving you right here. He came and got it. He came and got my Blazer and he drove it for about a week. I didn't take any money from him. I didn't want any money. But let me tell you what happened. My life changed that day for the better because I wasn't any longer carrying around bitterness. I wasn't carrying around hatred. I forgave him. And you have forgiven somebody when you quit demanding justice. I never again thought about getting him back, hoping he served some type of consequence as a result of it. And it set me free. To be honest with you, I don't know that he deserved being forgiven. He didn't ask for forgiveness. I went to him and gave him forgiveness. And I want to encourage you, if you're listening to this interview today, somebody you need to forgive. You need to let them go so that you're set free.
Mm. Oh my God. I love when I read that story in the book. And then I love hearing you tell it. I love reading it. And then you even talk about it in the book of like taking it to a woman at Starbucks you were pissed off at for like taking so long. And then it's like, this bitterness is showing up. So I got to do a random act of kindness to kind of offset this bitterness
Right.
because I just don't want to, I got to set myself free. It's not even about giving the gift, but it's also about setting myself free. And I really love that. Before we wrap up, one more thing is um, process for a mastermind group. You said wins,
Yeah.
accountability, man in the middle, and abundance. Is that right?
Yeah, there you
I
go.
just want to
That's
make sure
great. I
that
mean, that's what we do. We meet virtually every single week and we start out with big wins. I love to start out with wins. Then we go to man in the middle and guys get their opportunity to share the challenges that they're faced with. We share what's called a full cup, different ideas, different processes, different resources. And then we wrap up with a great encouraging word. And we meet every single week on a video conference call. And guys' lives are going to levels that I've never seen. And we have 150 members in 15 groups right now. We've got a real aspirational goal ahead of us. We're opening up groups for the first time. If you want to get involved, man, I encourage you to come to viewfromthetop.com, fill out an application. Let's have a conversation and see if you're a good fit for our mastermind.
Aaron, thank you so much. Final 30 seconds, three hitting questions. What do you think the world needs most of today?
Yeah, I think the world needs more of people that have the same core value as my number one, relationships mattering most. If we had that, it would solve 99% of the other problems.
Great. Number two, what are 1 to 3 books that you think people should read?
Yeah, Who Not How is a must read. Chris Voss wrote a really good book. that I read not too terribly long ago called Never Split the Difference. It's a phenomenal read. And of course, as a Christian, my go-to book is the Bible. So that's the one I start the day with each and every day. You read those 3 books, I think you'll take your life to new heights.
And lastly, what does it mean to be better than rich?
Yeah, better than rich. Rich is just a terminology that we've created as individuals. What I really want to be is joyful, not necessarily rich. And if you want to be rich in every area of your life, adopt joy and really live your life to its fullest. And it will be far better than being rich.
Aaron Walker, thank you so much for being here. And listener, thank you for tuning in. Assuming this episode helped you, it's your turn. Help others by sharing it with a friend. You could subscribe to the YouTube channel, submit a rating and review on Apple, Spotify. Aaron, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you, brother.
Hey, I enjoyed it. I hate to run, but I'm 2
I
minutes
have to
late
run
to the
too. That's
next.
why I'm looking at the time. I'm like
All
2
right.
minutes late for my next call. Thank you.
Thank you,
I'll see
Mike.
you
See you,
soon.
buddy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
What's up, guys? Biggs here. I hope you enjoyed that clip. If you did, go ahead and check out the other video that's being recommended on the screen right now. You can also subscribe to our channel. And then if you really are interested in what we do, go to automatedelegatesystemize.com to learn more about what we're up to. Thanks again.